Welcome to Community Chats, bringing you stories and insights from the heart of Community Living Toronto, a non-profit organization that proudly supports people with intellectual disabilities and their families. We will focus on stories of belonging and inclusion and topics of interest from communities across Ontario and the world. From uplifting moments to breaking barriers, from innovative policies to ideas from leading thinkers, we continue to advocate for inclusive communities and support the rights and choices of people with an intellectual disability.
Hi everyone, this is Brad Saunders, CEO at Community Living Toronto. Welcome to our Community Chats podcast. These podcasts are an opportunity to share, learn, and understand each other better. These podcasts are released on the 15th and the 30th of each month, so please like, listen, and give us your feedback. These are one of the ways we want to stay connected, and we value your feedback. The community living movement has relied on volunteer leadership since our inception, and Community Living Toronto is no exception to that rule. Each year, we nominate a group of people to volunteer on our board of directors and on our board committees. One of the key governance roles in our organization is that of board chair. This is a 2-year term that holds a great deal of responsibility and leadership. This year, Val Pichier completed her 2-year term, and Stephanie Gower began hers. Today, I have a conversation with Stephanie, where she talks about her background with people with disabilities, her career in government relations, and much more. And I'll bring you Stephanie Gower. Today, we're joined by our new chair of the board of directors at Community Living Toronto, Stephanie Gower. And Community Living Toronto is run on volunteer power, and Steph has been one of our longtime volunteers associated with us for a number of years. So I thought it'd be a great chance for people to get to know Steph a little bit more. Steph, welcome.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks for having me.
Glad you could join. Maybe just start for people that don't know you. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with community living, the community living movement, and Community Living Toronto in particular.
Yeah. So I have a young family, and we're based in sort of the High Park, Etobicoke area. I have a young son who's amazing. He's 1 year old. It's a big handful, but
Teddy, is that
Teddy's his name. Yeah. And my sort of day job, I'm a government relations consultant in the health and life sciences sector. I grew up in Etobicoke and born and raised and stayed in sort of the area. Okay. And my first sort of involvement with the community living movement was, I think it was back in 2015, maybe or so. I worked for, now it's called Inclusion Canada. Back then it was the Canadian Association for Community Living. And I was leading a lot of the development, so fundraising at the time. And, I had sort of a few friends that were involved in the sector and through families and siblings and that kind of thing. But that was my first real interaction. And then following that, I moved to a different charity, always kind of followed along with what was happening. And I've worked, for a whole host of different politicians, many of them which are, big supporters of the community living movement or other organizations. And then I found myself working for a consulting firm, and this is so long ago, I can't even believe it. Yeah, it's 8 years ago now, and we were working with Oasis. And so I was the lobbyist.
I think that's where we met through the work with Oasis.
Yeah, so that was I was Oasis, one of the team members and lobbyists that worked on that file for a number of years, and Community Living Toronto, and some partner organizations on some housing issues and a whole host of different things. So,
we made a lot of progress. That was good work.
It was
Fun
great
times.
work. Yeah, and then the pandemic hit, and I decided to change jobs. And and you just wanted my help for free now. So.
Yeah. Why pay for what you can get for free?
Exactly. So I joined the the government relations committee first, and then the board. Yeah.
Excellent. So now the role of chair, it's a big job at an organization of our size. There's a lot of there's the managing of meetings and sort of running a board, and working closely with me and sort of some of the senior leadership team. And then there's events that you go to, and just being, there's a lot to it. And, you know, you described you've got a busy job and career, and you've got a young family. What inspired you to take this on at this time?
I think we're at a really sort of unique time for a lot of charities and nonprofits right now. And the pandemic really shifted, you know, typical fundraising, I would say, for a lot
Mhm.
of groups. But you know, as well, I think it's also a unique time in politics, right? And so having governments as our biggest funder as well, I think it's an interesting sort of intersection for me of supporting a sector that is often, I don't want to say forgotten, but is
Yeah.
often, you know, not prioritized as we see a lot of other groups, especially in the health sector and that kind of thing, prioritizing that with governments that are either looking for re-election. We're probably anticipating a pretty substantial change federally. So, what are the opportunities there from an organizational standpoint on housing, that kind of thing, to be elevating? So, I think it's a really unique time where I can sort of mesh my day job and my government relations interests and all of that with an organization that is a leader, I would say, in the sector, and I would say not just in Toronto and Ontario, but across the country. Yeah, I think we can achieve a lot right now. So that's why I'm doing it.
And there's always, it's the one thing about government and the needs of a province like Ontario. It seems like there's infinite need and finite resources. And, you know, our sector has, you know, had varying degrees of success with some of our advocacy, both, you know, at the city level and provincially and federally. What is there, are there a couple, what works and what doesn't? Is it enough to be right? Is it enough to just have a compelling case? Or what are some characteristics of campaigns or pitches that we've made as a sector that you've been involved with that are home runs versus ones that aren't?
Well, I think you'll remember probably from when I was Oasis working on those files, I always said the sector needed to be unified with what the message was that you were sharing to government. And it doesn't matter which level of government we're talking about. When you're seeking funding from the government, and we're talking, you know, substantial dollars here as well,
Yeah.
you can't have a fragmented sector that is not on side, you know, and really you know, focused and singing from the same song sheet, right? So every agency in this example needs to do that. And that's why I think the Five to Survive campaign was pretty successful because
Yeah.
everyone came together. I think it also put the you know, the face to sort of the agencies. It was, we were leading with the people that are integral, the people that we support and serve, right? And their families and the communities, and what this would mean if we didn't see a substantial increase. So
Mhm.
I think you can't go into any sort of government relations efforts without, or you can't go in leading with the problem. You have to go in with what's the solution and what is this going to do, but then remind government who is this actually, and these are your voters, these are your constituents that you're impacting by not, you know, providing a substantial increase. So I think singing from that same song sheet and being really aligned on our messaging is key, and then putting the sort of the people first.
Okay. That's excellent. It's you mentioned it's an interesting time in politics, and some may say it's even a toxic time in politics. I was talking to some MPs who came to our barbecue a couple of weeks ago, and they talked about the door knocking they're doing and just the level of ranging from incivility to abuse that they're starting to save. And you know, I have a lot of regard for our elected politicians. It's a tough job, and I encourage anyone who wonders about, you know, if government's stingy with money or how they choose things to go sit in on the budget consultations that the province does, where a finance minister and a local member of provincial parliament and others will sit and listen to people speak for 3 minute chunks for hours at a time, looking for more resource and investment. So it is a tough job being in government these days, and I do think that the way you're laying it out is an effective way of doing it, making sure we stay positive, go in solution focused, and be careful about going too negative.
Yeah, it's really important, and I think you raised a good point. In any day, a minister or an MPP is meeting with probably 10 to 20 stakeholders, right? So they're going to remember the ones that were the best and the most positive and solutions oriented and willing to partner and work with the government and being realistic as well with
Yeah,
what they're asking. And they're going to remember the ones that were absolutely awful and came in with just these are all the problems. We don't have any
yeah,
solutions, but we need billions of dollars, right?
yeah,
So you need to be that positive, I want to help them, and everyone else is in between. So you want to be the top of that list.
right.
And that's every single day for these folks,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Now you do this professionally, and then you're also sort of involved politically. What do you love about it? Like what's the because you have a degree in science, right? Is it science that you've got is your
Yeah,
background?
it's nothing to do with politics, that's for sure. So no, I have my undergrad's art history and my master's of science in architectural restoration, actually. So nothing to
Okay.
do with what I do as a day job. But I got involved, I think, in my first campaign. I was 8 years old. My parents were really involved in sort of the grassroots, local community, the electoral district association for the party at the time. When I was done my undergrad, I worked for a politician that everybody knows, Rob Ford, being from
Oh yeah.
Etobicoke, his municipal campaign. And I just like it's exciting. It's so fun. I was a staffer on a national leadership campaign as well, so you get to see the country and go to really cool random places you'll never go. And it's exciting. There's always issues. There's always something fires to put out. It's just politics is a lot of fun. You meet really good and interesting people as well. And you meet a lot of folks, from coast to coast to coast that you would never have any way to meet any other way.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Very cool. So would you encourage people at these, to get involved politically at the local level,
of
even now,
course.
despite all the stuff that's going on? Well, is this a phase? We'll get through it and it'll get more normal, or what's your sense?
Well, I think if anything, now is a time of great change, right? And
Yeah.
so you have sort of any passion to or a strong desire to change sort of your local level government or provincial or federal, right? How better of a way to do that than to be out there and supporting if it's your local candidate or the party
Yeah.
itself and I don't it doesn't matter who it is, but then at least you feel like you've really contributed to it as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's starting to feel like more of a duty that we all have to pay attention to because it can
Yeah,
get away from you, and
absolutely.
hard to pull back once you've lost it.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned a degree in art history, which is a great segue to at the beginning of this. Before we started, we were comparing artwork
Yeah.
in our background. I've seen that picture a lot, and I've got one similar, but we haven't actually talked about it until just lately. So, tell me about the artwork that you've got behind and behind
I
you.
was on a call. I think we were doing our one of our strat plan meetings or it was in a video behind Susan, I think, and our former chair. And I said Angela a note and I said, I have to have that painting. I love it so much. And it's from Creative Village Art and Conrad is the artist and I sit here in my office all day long on conference calls for work, and the amount of people that have asked me
Yeah,
about it that think it's just such a great, talking point as well, and really, to support a local artist, but it's stunning too. And
yeah.
same as the one behind
Yeah, I've
you.
got one behind me too, and it's I mean I love it. It's visually
Yeah,
stunning, and Conrad is a prolific artist, and he's working. I'm at our East Mall site, and he's working out of here on a regular basis. Actually, he when I bought this, he told this is part of sort of a series of jungle themed paintings
okay,
that he did. So interesting that we've got, I think there's a number of them. I don't know how many, but it's a limited series that we're lucky enough
nice.
to both have. Um, a little bit, we've done in terms of advocacy, just to pivot back to that a little bit. We've, in the last number of years, what's been important to Community Living Toronto is making sure that we're putting the voices of the people that we support out in front of our advocacy or amplifying those voices as much as we can. And our influencers group is one of the ways that we've done that. And our influencers are not just advocating for things like we were talking about, government funding and policy changes in that, But just getting out there as people with disabilities that are proud of who they are, have other interests, and may also tie into some political stuff. And what are you know a little bit about the influences and what you're doing? What are your thoughts, or do you have any recommendations for them as they're doing their work on social media and TikTok and YouTube and speaking at conferences and things like that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think, probably a lot of clients that wish they had such a strong group of influencers, right? Because I think it's so fundamental to put a face to sort of the advocacy or whatever it is that you're out there talking about, right? So, in our case, I think it's really important, and they do phenomenal work. And I think the government, it's always a very strong reminder to the government on these are the people that we are investing in and into their communities and into supporting them, and ensuring that they thrive in their local communities. So I think it's great. I think more people should be doing it. And it takes a lot. You have to
Yes.
be very brave to be out there and sharing your story. And so I would never do it on social media.
That's
So I
yeah.
commend them for doing that, right? But I think it does make a lot of difference and it really matters.
That's good. That's helpful. I was able to see them present at the Community Living Ontario conference, which was last week when we're recording this. But it was so good. Like
Yeah.
they're just so comfortable in front of a crowd and managed the whole presentation. It was really
Well,
inspirational.
and you've been in meetings with me in government, right? When one of them is and we've done them with, I feel like
Yeah.
everybody's been in those meetings, but it's such a strong voice and presence in those meetings as well. So
It's this evolution. I mean, I think it was the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, where this sort of phrase, sort of nothing about me without me,
yeah,
was coined. But that's
that
really evolved into nothing without me. So it doesn't matter whether, it's a disability specific issue or, or anything else, that people need to be front and center and present and involved. And I like that evolution in our thinking.
that's great.
Um, so over your time with us, which has been a number of years, what any moments that sort of stand out in particular? And just a heads up that after this question, I'm going to ask you our sort of standard question that everybody gets asked. So I'll turn your mind first to what's a moment that stands out, and then the final question that we've got.
Well, I think it was 2020 and it was the start of the pandemic and we were all at home. I was fortunate enough we went up to our family cottage and we were up there and we didn't even have internet. I was hotspotting from my phone thinking, oh, we'll be back home in, 5 days or whatever it is
Right.
from now. We had a very tiny condo at the time in the city, so we couldn't work from there. So I'm glad we were
Right.
at the cottage. But I remember being on the phone with you and James at the time and Jonathan thinking about like, what is this? This is just awful. And no one in government at the time was focused on our sector. Everyone was talking because I guess because it started really, the pandemic started really hitting the long-term care homes, right? And
Right.
so another congregate setting, but nobody thought about us. And so I remember sitting there at my table, at the kitchen table at the time, hammering out a letter with you and James and Jonathan asking for that residential relief fund.
Hmm.
And the minister signed off on it. And like that in my mind was great. So we had support. We had
Yeah.
a very supportive minister at the time as well that really tried to
Minister Smith. Yeah.
Minister Smith that really tried to move everything forward. He was such a great advocate for the sector. But it sticks in my mind as yeah, we were successful and it was a great help and supported a lot of the agencies in Ontario that needed it at the time. But it reminds me every day of why we have to continue advocating and why we have to continue doing what we're doing right now because we are not the top priority and we need to always remind people that we should be a top priority. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That
So.
it was so surprising, disappointing. It
Yeah.
was it was what it was, that as soon we progressed so far during COVID around being recognized and involved with health and often mentioned in announcements that were coming out, and almost immediately after COVID ended,
It's
we were right off the radar, and it
I
felt like
know.
we were starting. And so many people in the sector advocated for for that sort of recognition, and it was
Yeah,
pretty discouraging when we found ourselves maybe not back to where we were, but certainly a lot further behind than where we'd progressed to.
absolutely. And so
Yeah,
that's why it's sort of in my mind, yeah, it was a big win for us at the time to get
yeah,
that in a really heightened situation, but it's also acts as a very strong reminder of that we need to keep going.
yeah. Final question. We did our 75 years of belonging. So we like to get everybody's thoughts on what belonging means to you. So in your case, what does belonging mean to you?
I think it just means, a community in which you live and thrive and grow, and everything that you could possibly potentially want to be doing and experiencing in life is accessible to you. And I think, we often have to remind ourselves that that's not the case for a lot of folks in Toronto, for example. And I think, belonging in a community is really, that's home for you, and you have everything, and you feel the comforts of home, and you have everything you could possibly want or need. And so that's sort of my sense of it.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think you're yet at 2 full days or 48 hours of being the chair. So, a couple more years ahead and we'll get to work quite closely. But thanks for taking the time this afternoon to introduce yourself, and really glad that you're spending your volunteer time and commitment and passion with us. Thanks you. Thanks a lot, Steph.
Thanks, Brad, for having me, and I look forward to continue working with you and everybody at CLTO.
Great. Thank you. Volunteers are vital for nonprofits and charities to thrive. People like Stephanie and all of our volunteers make that happen. I look forward to working with Stephanie over the next 2 years as Community Living Toronto continues to make a difference in our city. Thanks for joining our Community Chats podcasts. We release a new edition on the 15th and the 30th of each month, so please subscribe to keep up to date. Thanks for joining, and see you next time.
Don't forget to join us next time as we unpack the power of community through collaborative initiatives and shared experiences. Available on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Audible, and YouTube. Follow us on social media at CL Toronto. Let's chat, share, and spread those good vibes together. We hope these discussions will inspire you and give new ideas to add your voice to our mission of making our communities and neighborhoods inclusive and welcoming.